hey, let's jump in. Week number 2, the silver, the post, the street. So we're going to look at it, the silver, the post, and the street. So let me just ask this question. Have you ever just had a problem? I mean, you just like, man, I got a problem. You know, I'm going to tell you, the first one comes to mind. I was in the 2nd grade. Yeah, they had schools back then. And I was in the 2nd grade, and I didn't have to walk uphill both ways in the snow barefooted. That was my mom and dad. So, you know, we had a test. The teacher gave us a test. Well, I didn't know any of the answers. And it wasn't because I didn't study or prepare. Well, it was because I didn't study and prepare. But I didn't know any. I didn't know if I was answering right. I didn't know. So this day, she says, exchange papers with the person across the aisle from you, and then we will grade those. And I remember you're thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, why do I have to do your job? I mean, this is what you get hired to do. But anyway, we switched those, and she gave the answers and, you know, check and all this stuff. Well, I knew that mine's not going well over here. And then when we got those back, shoved that thing under the desk. Don't know what happened to it. So everybody, all of a sudden, there's one missing. Who's been? Yeah. So they start naming. I'm sitting there like aching, waiting for the finger to be pointed. You know. So I'm just sitting there. I'm kind of staring into space, and finally, we go from class to clan to family to Steve. So finally, it was me, and I'm the guilty party. And so, yeah. So you know, I had a problem. How was I going to get out of this? So I did like any 2nd grader would. Oh, here it is. Weird, right? And it's all wadded up and everything. And she comes over there and looks at it. And she says, you know what this deserves, don't you? And I'm thinking, yeah, probably, you know, C-. I'm good with that. You know, just give me a C-. That was A's in my home. So let's just, you know, yeah, give me a C-. And she takes me out and gives me a paddle, and the first one I ever got in school. So I'm like, okay, no, that's not what I agreed to. You led the witness. I did not agree to it. I wanted a C, but anyway, it was embarrassing. I had a problem. So here's the problem. 2,000-ish years ago, in that neighborhood, let's go to Jerusalem, and the Pharisees, dude's got a problem. So, I mean, these guys have a problem. They got, you know, well, let's just look at it. We're going to look at it. It was the annual Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is what we will know it as Passover. Passover. Let me give you a shameless plug for Friday night, Good Friday. We will have our Seder, which means meal order. Our Seder Passover experience in the house right here. Two campuses combined. So it is a limited amount of seating, and we understand what was happening during the Passover. So this was the feast. This was a big deal going on in Jerusalem. People are everywhere. So let's just read Luke chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. Now the feast of unleavened bread, Passover, drew near, which is called the Passover. And verse number 2, and the chief priest and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death. Him being Jesus, so it's no secret that who him is. So him is Jesus. They don't like him. They want to kill him. So, for they feared the people. So now we've got a lot of information here in two scriptures. So the Pharisees had a problem. Let's just break it down. Problem number 1, they had a people problem. Sometimes we just have a people problem. And you know what? We pastor, you know, full time for a living. That's what we do. We were, you know, we worked and we did this for nothing for 100 years. And, you know, it's always the same song and dance. You can't do church without people. And so, you know, we just always, you know, say it's people. Sometimes we have a people problem. Just how it is. Sometimes we don't have a people problem. So these guys had a people problem because there was a multitude and an influx of people by the hundreds and maybe even thousands into Jerusalem because of the Passover. And these people were excited, Messiah-loving people. So they're excited. They have heard stories about Jesus. They want to meet him. They want to hear something that he's teaching. They just want to be in the experience. They just want to be near him. So first of all, they got a people problem. Problem number 2, they got a Jesus problem. Straight up. You know what? I'm just going to tell you. For some of us in this world, we got a Jesus problem. You know what? It's just like, my problem in second grade that day, I didn't have a lack of study and lack of preparation problem. I had a Greg problem. See, I had to switch with Greg. I had a Greg problem. Greg could have very easily put checks on all of that. So I had a Greg problem, and I had a teacher problem. So in other words, these people, this is how we have a Jesus problem. Do you realize in our world we have a Jesus problem? Because Jesus has a standard. His righteousness is the righteousness that his righteousness requires him to require. We have a Jesus problem. We don't want to do what Jesus commands us to do. You mean I'm supposed to love that person? I don't even like them. Did say like, supposed to love them. So you know what? Some of us have a Jesus problem. I think all of us, throughout the course of maybe a week, we'll find that we've got a Jesus problem. Okay. It's almost like, I'll never forget, it's like, all of a sudden she starts whipping you and whipping you and whipping you until you straighten up, and then you walk away and say, okay, Tina, I will. And you just get mad and walk away. So you just give in, So, problem number 3. So they got a people problem, they got a Jesus problem. Problem number 3, they got a fear problem. So they're afraid of the repercussions of what will happen from their actions. So they've got this fear problem. The religious leaders feared the people that were surrounding Jesus. They feared the people that feared God. And see, sometimes we want to do something that's not exactly in order. Maybe we want to do something that's not exactly Jesus culture. And we're a little bit afraid that somebody's going to see us doing it. So let's just look at this fear problem. They were not afraid to kill the Son of God. Let's just make sure we understand this. They were not afraid to kill the Son of God. Man, this is terrible. But what they were afraid of was upsetting the people. Hey, we'll just kill Jesus. That's fine. Let's kill Jesus. We can't upset the people over it because there's going to be a revolt and an uprising. Then Rome's going to come in and shut us all down. All this. So the government. We can't rock the boat because we are under Roman rule. They're under occupation. So we can't. They'll take away our Passover feast. So we can't do any of this. So problem number 4, we want to kill Jesus. We have a fear problem. We have to separate us from the people we're afraid of. So this is what they wanted to separate from the people they were afraid of. Problem number 5, they needed an inside man. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you really want to mess something up, get an inside man. Because I'm going to tell you, I went out, I have some nursery stock, and I went out and I saw something go, and I'm like, oh, you little rat. And I've got a little field mouse in there. And so here's the thing. I put some good ingredients on the ground. It's like 99.9% good food and like 0.5% poison. He's probably ate it and he's dead in his hole. So it's another thing. You have ants. You know what the best way to kill ants is to let them take the food back to their lair and kill all of them from within. So sometimes it's just good. If we're going to do this, these guys needed an inside man. They didn't have one. They have a problem. They don't have an inside man. Someone close to Jesus. How can we get somebody close to Jesus to betray him? Well, that's not going to happen. Look, they defend him. They'll fight for him. Some of these guys are zealots. They'll do what they have to. So how do we find one of those? See, here's the sad news. The sad news is there's always an inside man. And you know who that inside man usually is? You and me. We're the inside man to our own destruction. See, sometimes the inside man is letting the enemy know. Here's what I say all the time. I'm the only one I can't get away from. I'm the only one that I can't escape my thoughts. Do you realize I have to look at me? I have to look at me without any clothes on. It's not pretty. I have to look at me all the time. I have to think my thoughts. I have to be in the same head. I have to eat the same thing that I eat. So I am my own worst. I'm my own inside guy. I'm the inside man. So sometimes more damage can be done. We don't need somebody else to come in. We just need us. So I think I got them laughing over here. And I'm pretty sure Pastor Alex is making notes. He's got a book on my mess ups. So anyway, and I told him, I said, you don't mess up as much as I do because you're just good. But so I'm just going to go create them. I'm just going to make up stuff that he said. So let's jump to verse 3 through 6. Let's just jump into it. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot. So Judas was not an uncommon name. It was a common name for that day and that time in that region in the Middle East. And so they identified him several times as Iscariot. So Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. So now we know exactly who we're talking about. The guy who's with Jesus and the 12 disciples. He went away and conferred with the chief priest. Here's our inside man. And officers, how he might betray him to them. And they were glad. Of course they were glad. They're trying to figure this out. And they agreed to give him money. Man, that money can buy betrayal, guys. Money can buy dissension, discord. Money can buy this. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of a crowd. So every problem is solved in verses 3, 4, and 5. We get him away from the crowd. We've got an inside man. We don't have to be afraid of the crowd. We get rid of our Jesus problem, our people problem. All this stuff goes away with this one guy. So here's the old saying. When I was growing up, this was a popular saying. The devil made me do it. I mean, I remember having a sticker. These stickers you could get back in the 70s, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. You know what? I think that we think the devil entered into Judas and he just zombie-like went around betraying Jesus because the devil made me do it. See, that Judas was supernaturally overtaken by evil, that he was in a zombie-like state and under the bidding of the dark side. I mean, it's just, his name might have been Luke for all we know. You know what I mean? So we just think this is automatically what, he was taken over. He was entered into. He was deceived. He wasn't under his own control. Let's just see what Matthew's gospel has to say about that. Matthew chapter 26, verse 14 through 16, very same telling. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, same thing, identified him as one of the 12 followers of Jesus. His name is Judas. His name is Iscariot, so we know exactly who it is. He went to the chief priest. I don't see any zombie attitude here. I don't see any glazed over eyes. And he said, when he went to them, what will you give me if I deliver him over to you? And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him. In other words, we have contract. You've bound the contract with money. Now it's a binding contract, and I've got to follow through with it. I'm good with this. He sought out what he could do to betray Jesus. Judas didn't accidentally lean into mind control, guys, at the hands of the enemy. He knew what he was doing. He went to the high priest with premeditation. He knew what he was doing. He searched out a monetary gain to willingly betray his Lord and his friend. Man, this is not, sometimes the word Lord is distant to us. Sometimes we think of Lord or Jesus or Christ or God as distant, Holy Spirit as distant, a force. But like I say all the time, you can't have a personal relationship with a force. So Jesus even tells them in John chapter 15, I call you friends now. I don't call you students anymore. I don't call you apprentice anymore. I call you friends. You're my friends. And it's a different level of intimacy. He has just betrayed his Lord, his God, and his friend. And none of this was done against the will of Judas. He didn't do it. Okay, all right, okay, I'll do it. None of that stuff. He willingly went. So Judas deliberately leaned into full-blown betrayal. You can't be betrayed by a stranger. They don't know you. You don't know them. We could straight up be betrayed by a friend. Betrayal kind of starts on the inside. So what does it mean that Satan entered Judas? I just want to hit this real quick. Sometimes we're a little confused over, what does that mean that Satan entered him? I think it's a little closer to home than what we think. Judas faced the same temptations that we face today. Judas chose to lean into the voice of Satan in his head. I have said this over and over and over for the last 3 months. We need freedom from our thoughts. Remember, I'm the only one that can't escape my thoughts. So I need freedom from my thoughts. You need freedom from our thoughts. We need freedom from our thoughts. And we have to choose to place them under the cross, under the foot of the cross, under the foot. You know, we are overcomers. So he acted upon motives of selfishness. Temptation is always there. It's always going to be there, guys. We have to choose each day if we're going to make room to hear from God or to hear from Satan. Because to hear from God, we have to pick up something called a cross daily. In other words, I have to search out the Lord, and I have to apprentice and follow him, be a part of him every day. The closer I get to him, the less I'm going to hear from the enemy. So let's look. I just want to throw these out there real fast. Let's look at the possible historical motives Judas had to do what he did. Why would he do what he did? So let's look at the possible motives of why he did what he did. Number one is, some believe his motives were noble. He's like, wait, what? Some believe that his motives were noble. It's like, well, he was just simply trying to force Jesus into acknowledging and rising up to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He still had this mental image that Jesus was going to overthrow their oppressors. In other words, I will force him into revealing himself as the Messiah and King. I'll force him. You know what? It's coming to a head. Somebody has to rise up. So whether you believe that one or not, it has some validity, makes some sense. I'm just saying historically, this is one of the thoughts. Historically, another thought is, number two, some believe that Judas was an outsider. Okay, so I'll show you what it means. That the name Iscariot was from a city in southern Judea. That would make him the only Judean among all Galileans. So sometimes, you're like, well, I'm the only one that's on the outside here. I'm the only one that doesn't fit in. It's like being at a party you weren't invited to. I've been there before. So it's like, I just don't know how I fit into this. So some believe he was an outsider, and he just simply got tired of being an outsider. I don't buy that one, but anyway, that's just a belief. Number three is, some believe that he could have been a zealot. See, Simon was a zealot, so, Peter probably was. So they believe that the name Iscariot is a word that means assassin, so to speak. So that this was his motive all along, was to basically undermine Jesus. Some believe, number four, some believe that he simply followed Jesus for selfish reasons. This is very believable. He just followed Jesus for selfish reasons all along. In other words, this is the king that's going to overthrow the Roman government, going to restore Israel back to its glory. And when this happens, I am the CFO of this organization. I will have a good spot. I will be like Speaker of the House. When this happens, I will have my own office at the end overlooking the Manhattan. So this is what they just believed, that he thought that he was going to get this great position. And here's why it makes sense to me. After a little while, when Jesus didn't become who he thought he would become, then he got his feelings hurt and felt betrayed. So he returned the favor. In other words, you know what? Here's the thing. Let's just put you and your friend together. Your friend is always going to, we have this image that our friend has to become. And when our friend is not going to become that image, then we lose heart and we feel like they betrayed us because they didn't become who we thought they should become. So do we get upset with Jesus because we don't think Jesus is acting quick enough for us? Or Jesus is acting in, you know what? I'm going to confess to you right now. I wish Jesus would do everything I want. But you know what? I'm afraid I'd go to hell if Jesus did everything I wanted, because I don't have pure motives like he does. I'm afraid I know I would mess a lot of people's lives up. So Jesus is not going to do everything I want. So therefore, am I going to just feel upset and bothered and betrayed that he didn't do it the way I wanted? See, maybe he was a little upset and bothered. So let's lean in to these three topics of the sermon. Let's lean into the silver. So Judas sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. According to Exodus chapter 21, verse 32, 30 pieces or 30 shekels of silver was the burial price of a slave. If a bull gores your slave and your slave is killed, then you have to pay 30 shekels of silver to bury. I mean, this is like chump change, y'all. It's like, do you realize, I found this out yesterday. Do you realize if you bury a body, you can't pour bleach over it, you have to put lime? I didn't know that. I was buying some bleach and somebody said, where's Tina? I said, I killed her. And they said, really? I said, yeah, that's why I'm buying bleach. A lady next to me goes, you have to use lime. I'm like, okay. Okay, I want your name, and I want to know where you live, and I hope you don't drive by my house. So apparently that's what you got to do. So this is the burial price of the value of a slave. But I want you to notice something with me. The Bible never says that Judas was paid in coins. All accounts of this happening says pieces of silver. He was paid in pieces of silver, a slave's wage. Judas sold Jesus to be killed. He sold his friend out. He sold his God out, his Lord out, his Christ, who he watched do the miraculous. He felt it. He experienced every bit of it, and he sold him out for the amount of 1 week's slave wages. So he didn't enslave Jesus, though. See, here's the thing. I think we would like to think that we enslaved that person. He didn't enslave Jesus. He enslaved himself. I mean, this is so sad because, sometimes we just want so desperately to have our way that we're willing to enslave someone with our words, and we're really just enslaving ourselves. He even tried to give the money back. I mean, it was noble. Like, dude, I don't want your money. Give the money back. He wanted release from this bondage. In other words, they're laughing at him. This is your wage for betraying God. Now we own you. I mean, we own your thoughts, we own your deeds, we own your future. And he wanted release from this bondage. In other words, we watch these movies where the devil's, people sell their soul to the devil. By the way, you may have given yourself to the devil, but God can redeem you. It's not a done deal, by the way. And they sign their name. It's like, hey, listen, I own you. No, you don't. Because I am a child of the King, and I can be a child of the King if I want to be. I walked with you willingly before, but I'm walking with Jesus willingly now. He wanted release from his bondage, and he did everything he could after the fact to free himself. Think about this. We are doing everything after the fact to free ourselves. There was a guy once that called me, and he wanted me to take a church to pastor. This is before Christpoint Church. To take a church to pastor that he didn't go to, and they didn't know I existed. I'm like, how are you going to work all this out? You don't even know who they are, who I am. And he said, I'll pay your salary. I'm like, no, you won't pay my salary either, because I will be enslaved to you. But somewhere along the line, he felt guilty that he betrayed and helped destroy that church, and I will help you to restore. I'm like, you go back. Well, I'm not going back. I'm like, well, you should. So Judas did everything he could after the fact to free himself, except go to the one that could free him. I mean, he could have went to him. He would have had to crawl through the crowd, get to the cross. But see, Judas didn't stick around long enough to see that happen. So let's lean into the post. So Matthew chapter 21, verse 2. It's Palm Sunday. Our kids came in and whacked you real good with those palms on the way in. And you know what? It's great. It's awesome. Matthew chapter 21, verse 2, we're talking about this very happening. Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. So here's a colt. It's never been ridden. You know why it's never been ridden? Because Jesus is not going to be second to anything or anybody. First fruits for Jesus. Everything's first for Jesus. So Jesus, you mean Jesus got on an unbroken, unbridled, a very wild, untamed animal? Yeah. Figure that one out. Unbroken. It was probably a family pet, so it was comfortable around people. Insignificant beast of burden. This thing's just insignificant. This thing has no importance whatsoever. He's not a noble steed. Not a white horse with his hair braided. You know, he's just a simple pack animal. Just a pack animal, guys. And this little donkey was about to carry the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the Son of God and the most important person who has ever lived in the greatest celebration the world will ever know. And he's about to do this. So get this. I want you to get this. Let's lean into the post a little bit. I want you to get this. You're the owner of the donkey. Let's put you in that place. You're the owner of the donkey. You come out every day. You tie this thing to a post. Do you realize every day we go through a ritual? Every day. You know what wakes me up a lot of times in the morning? The coffee maker automatically coming on because Tina likes it after it's brewed a little while. I don't drink coffee that much unless I'm here because we have the good creamer. So I can hear it bubbling and popping and going on like that because she likes for it to sit for a little while and steep. I don't know what it does. So it tastes better, I'm assuming. So I wake up to that. It's ritual. It's routine. She puts that stuff in there and sets it and programs it every night before she goes to bed. It's routine. You guys, put yourself in this place. You're going through your routine. You're doing the same thing every morning. You're getting up. You're getting your coffee. You read your Bible. You maybe do your devotions. You may watch the news. You may check the weather. I check the weather a lot. You check all these things, and it's just your normal routine. This guy has been tying this donkey up ever since it was born, and probably tying its mother up ever since he had it. And he's going through an everyday ritual, and then God is going to lean into him. Think about it now. Wait a minute. Just like that, God chooses to lean into him. Let's lean into that for a moment. Sometimes we need to realize that just on our normal happenings, on our normal day, when things are just normally going, God just may decide to lean into you and me in a different way. And then all of a sudden our lives are changed forever. Let's lean into that for a moment. Hey, let's lean into the street. Something's going to happen in the street. So Jesus gets on the donkey and they start the parade. This is the beginning of the last week of Jesus, guys. We've been doing this ongoing study on Wednesday nights, the final week of Jesus. This is where it starts, by the way. And the week, it starts out with a parade, and it begins to start falling apart. The week does. Not falling apart for us. It was falling together for us. But I hate that it was the worst day in history and the best day in history. So, people are gathered from every corner of the earth. Remember, these are Messiah, excited, seeking people. They want to be there. They lean into the enormity of the moment. This is great. This is great. Who is it that we're here to see? He says he's the Messiah. He says the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I mean, he's going to be coming down this on his noble steed. Oh, no, he's a little donkey. He'll be all right, though. And so it's like, oh, my gosh. Do you realize the donkey never mattered, but yet it mattered? And do you realize it didn't matter that he wasn't on some white stallion? It didn't matter. It didn't matter that. See, that stuff's coming, by the way, with a tattoo on his thigh. So I don't have tattoos, but Jesus is going to have one on his thigh. Tells exactly who he is when he's coming. So anyway, they lean into the presence of the divine. I mean, where Jesus is, things start happening. People start gathering. People want to be. They rip apart what is alive on trees to shade their living king. You know what? I'm going to tear off the living to shade. And to shade was an act of royalty. This is what, in other words, they would fan the king, the royal court. They began to uncover what covers them in order to cover the ground that lay before the king. In other words, I'll take what covers me. Here's my cloak, my coat, and I will lay it down. That thing, it doesn't matter to me anymore. What covers me has been given up to him. And now I watched him go. Do you realize that people will say, there's people alive that will say, I saw an Elvis concert. I went to a Michael Jordan ball game. Tina and I watched Tom Brady play a football game before he retired. I got to see Jesus come by on a donkey. Can you imagine the story that was told through that family? I saw him. He looked at me. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but I would tell it that way. He looked at me. And they began to exalt him, and they filled the firmament with praises of him. Hosanna in the highest, glory to the King. Hosanna. They were making it hard on the Pharisees, guys. Making it very difficult, because everything that they did made them hate Jesus more. And they're just making it worse and worse on really themselves, not on Jesus. The crowd that day leaned into Jesus with such passion that it struck fear in the hearts of the religious leaders. Sometimes when we become so passionate about Jesus, we will strike fear into the people who are not so passionate about Jesus. Think about that. If you've ever been uncomfortable with somebody's Jesus talk, it's just because you're not leaning in as hard as they're leaning in. I'm going to say, yeah, me too, guys. If I am not as excited as this person, then you know what? I need to probably search why I'm not as excited. Because you know what? Maybe I've just been beaten down so many times that I'm just a little bit calloused. And I just don't know if I believe that I'm going to be that excited. Or maybe your excitement makes me uncomfortable. Their excitement was making these guys uncomfortable. Hey, they even said, hey, can you get these disciples to quit fueling all these people, gassing them up? And Jesus says, hey, dude, the rocks will cry out. In other words, in the presence of the Lord, if we don't let praise go, then something is going to let praise go. It's going to happen from somewhere. So Jesus said, hey, you're the instruments that I choose to do this through. Don't make it be something that is not meant for it to be through. So they wanted to kill the very person that the people were worshiping. And what's he doing? He's marching down the street with tanks and with armor and with guns. He's leading a revolt. He is leading an army that is going to. No, he's coming on a donkey. God, this is what we're afraid of. They're afraid. They're not afraid. You notice Rome's not afraid of him. Rome's like, I don't see an army being formed here. I just see a guy leading people. And he's coming on a donkey, and they're afraid of him. It's because we're always afraid that Jesus is going to change the world we're comfortable with. And we're just so scared of that. You know what? It's okay. He is going to change the world I'm comfortable with. And it's okay. If you stick around Christpoint Church long enough, you're going to find out that change happens all the time. And you know what? Sometimes it pushes our comfort bubble out like crazy. But you know what? If we expand it enough, we'll be okay for a little while until we do it again. See, what we lean into will have the power to change or to destroy our world. Judas leaned into himself, and he died by himself. That's so sad. Judas leaned in by himself, and he died by himself, enslaved and alone. The owner of the donkey allowed God to lean into him. There's a lot of people that didn't get mentioned in all the chapters, Old and New Testament, that didn't get mentioned. Their names never got mentioned. Their appearance was never even spoken of, but this guy's was. The owner of this donkey allowed God to lean into him, and he found himself leaning into the greatest praise celebration the world has ever known. The crowd leaned away from their daily routine. You know what? It's worth me leaning away from everything that distracts me and lean into the one that matters the most. Probably changed their lives forever. The Pharisees leaned into their fear and demanded Jesus silence the accolades. They discovered that it would be easier for stones to sing than to keep people who really want to worship the Lord quiet. See, are we leaning into the presence of God? That's my question. Are we leaning into the presence of God? Because we're about to enter a week that we have packed it full of prayer and fasting. And it starts today, this morning already for me and Tina. Prayer and fasting and worship, our worship experience on Wednesday night. And the Easter egg and our Seder. And Passover experience and 5 services on Sunday. It's because we want to be intentional about leaning in to what matters the most. What we lean into will have the power to change or destroy our world. So let me show you something. Let me tell you about 2 men. 2 men, both were born in the 1700s. Just show you the value of leaning in. Both were born in the 1700s, about the same time, early-ish 1700s. One believed that every home was a sanctuary for Christ. The other didn't believe that. So the other man, his name is Max Jukes, man number 1. In 1874, a sociologist, 1874, so this is 100 years later, a sociologist named Richard Dugdale visited 13 county jails in upstate New York, and he discovered 6 persons under 4 different family names that were blood related. So he was very curious, so he did a deep dive into the family line. And he traced the family back to a Dutch settler named Max Jukes. This guy was born between 1720 and 1740. So this is the guy, the other guy, not the guy with a sanctuary and a home. This is the other guy. He identified that this Jukes guy identified 540 of his descendants. Of the amount of them were 76 convicted criminals in his descendants up to that time, 18 brothel keepers, 120 prostitutes, over 200 government relief recipients. This one family cost the government tens of millions of dollars in today's currency. So let's just talk about the second man, or he's actually the first guy. His name's Jonathan Edwards, born about the same time. He was a revivalist. He authored many books inspiring people to take the gospel to the nations. He married a woman who was equally on fire for the presence of the Lord. They feared God. They read the Bible, prayed together, and believed that every home should be a sanctuary for Christ. They had 11 children. Jonathan passed blessings over onto his children every day. Of their 1,394 known descendants, among their descendants were 13 college and university presidents, 65 college or university professors, 3 U.S. senators, 30 judges, 100 lawyers, 60 physicians, 75 Army and Navy officers, 100 ministers and missionaries, 60 authors of prominence, 1 vice president of the United States. So, one man believed that every home should be a sanctuary for Christ. One man had no idea, didn't believe, was as far away from the Lord as he could be. This man leaned into Christ. This man leaned into the world and himself, leaned into the devil. This man's lineage, just a drain on society. Do you realize that of Jonathan Edwards' descendants, not one is ever recorded, ever received any government assistance for anything? Cost the government $0. This hundreds of millions of dollars. Jail sentences, prison sentences, brothels, prostitution, everything. This man leaned into Jesus, and his family produced over and over and over sanctuaries for Christ. Over and over and over. Jonathan Edwards leaned into himself and his family for Christ, on behalf of Christ. The silver, the post, and the street. One rejects God, one meets God, one sees God. We have to choose this day. We need to choose one of those 3. Are we going to reject God? Are we going to meet God? Are we going to see God? See, what we lean into has the power, again, let me say it, to change or destroy. Max Jukes leaned into himself, leaned into evil, leaned into everything that was wrong. Jonathan Edwards leaned into Christ. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. So stand with me. Let me just say, you know, it's Palm Sunday, guys. And what we can lean into today matters. Who we can lean into today matters. So I want to ask you point blank, with intention, with intentionality, with focus. Do you know Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior? Because I'm going to tell you, everything starts right now. You say, I'm not sure if I could even pass on that kind of lineage. You're not going to if we don't start right now. We're not intentional right now. If we don't lean into Jesus while the leaning moment is available, we will miss everything, because there's not going to be a lot of opportunities. You know, with every passing day, we begin to create more away from Lord moments. So I want to ask you, with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, would you pray a sinner's prayer with me that says, and you know what, you say, well, you know, that sinner's word's a little harsh. It just means that I don't know Jesus. That's all it means. You know, it's like, well, I'm not calling you anything. I'm just saying, you know, I didn't know Jesus at one time. And then I found that he knew me. And I invited him in my heart, and we started a good walk. So I want to ask you today, with everybody in the house that will help you pray, will you pray and ask the Lord into your heart? So I want to ask you to do it with me. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, pray this prayer. I'll lead you. You just repeat it after me, and everybody will say it out loud with you. So let's pray it this way. Dear Jesus, I invite you into my heart. I want to lean into your presence. I want to lean into your heart. I want to be as much like you as I can possibly be. So I ask you, Lord, enter into my heart. Forgive me of my sins. I repent of my sins. I confess them before you. And because I have leaned in to your salvation that you created on the cross, resurrection, and I am a child of the King. Thank you, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, did you pray that?